Hello and welcome to the Political Orphanage, a home for plucky misfits and problem solvers. I'm your host, Andrew Heaton, recording in that weird holiday interregnum between Christmas and New Year's. Happy holidays? So apparently, the students registered as disabled or in need of accommodation has skyrocketed in higher education, particularly the higher end of higher education, raising the question of, is this real, or are colleges overdoing it? And if they are, is it because students and families are gaming the system, or because we've trained a generation of people to think of themselves as disabled? To tackle that thorny discussion, I will loop in a recent college educator and a parent. Enjoy! We are bringing back the world's smartest podcast network, although, as per usual now, we don't have all of the members of our gang here. Unfortunately, Turner Sparks has been poisoned. This is what the papers are saying. He has been poisoned. One could assume that it is food poisoning. I am going straight to foul play. I believe he has been poisoned. I have a list of people that I will mention on air later in an attempt to cause injury to their careers. But he can't join us. Fortunately, we are joined
by...
Saudis. Huh?
The Saudis poisoned him. Sorry to jump in.
That's right. Yeah.
We gave it all away.
They got the revenge.
Yep.
They got it. That was it. The first voice you heard there, that is Michael Ira Kaplan. He is a friend of mine, a member of WSPN, and the official New York real estate agent of WSPN. And
yes, thank you.
Should note for our purposes today, as we will be talking about disabilities in higher education, Kaplan, to our knowledge, is the only person in WSPN who has children. So he's got...
I thought you were going to say has a disability, but has children.
I have both.
Okay, great.
I think I had a disability before they were cool, and I am fertile. So yes, I can procreate. I'm the one who's proven they can procreate on the staff.
Nice.
Which I consider a disability, but we can talk about that later.
And the voice that you are hearing there is Dr. Andrea Jones-Rooy. They are the host of Behind the Data, and while not a parent, is a former academic who, in fact, toiled in the academic minds of New York City in higher education for some time. Hello, Andrea.
Hello. It's good to be here. I'm excited for the airing of grievances and candid discussion.
And I think that you brought this story to our attention. We're going to be talking about an article that was featured in The Atlantic called Disability Nation. And I think you're the one that brought this to our attention, Andrew. Was it
I would love to take credit for that. And usually I am known to forward an Atlantic article or two as the token liberal of the crowd. But Kaplan actually brought this to our attention. But then I had strong opinions.
Well, I was about to say, whenever I
knew you would have strong opinions.
Whenever I get anything
I sent it to you at once.
Gently condemnatory of higher education, I just sort of assume that you might have strong
If that's what you think, then my personal branding is on point.
Good. All right. Well, Kaplan, given that you introduced this article to us, can you give us a synopsis of the article and why we're talking about it?
This is an article. It was in The Atlantic, and it was about how in college campuses now, especially elite universities, it's, there used to be learning disabilities is not new. People have always had them going back. I remember as a kid, 90210 did a very special episode where Donna Martin, it turned out, is not a dummy. She just has a problem with tests, so she didn't have time limits, and she graduated famously. But it's become to a point where it's possibly getting out of control. That's what I want to figure out, because at some schools, there's 25 to 35% of the kids qualify for a disability, which means they have different rules, but they don't have to have limits on tests.
And actually, I'll pause you briefly, Kaplan, just so we've got the data points there. Mentioned in the article, Brown University and Harvard both have 20% or more of their undergraduate students now registered as disabled. Amherst has 34% of its students registered as disabled. Stanford is at 38% registered with disabilities, and 24% of them receive academic housing or accommodations. I don't know the last, but 38%, very high.
Right.
And
Tell me about the accommodations. Say that sentence.
I'm going to have to go through my notes again. It had something to do with academic or housing, maybe in terms of things that you're eligible for. But main point is very high.
Yes.
And it does seem to be correlated with high-end universities because the amount of people that are registered with disabilities at community colleges is very, very low. So please continue, Kaplan. But yeah, that was
that's a great way. I was trying to figure out if if disabilities are the new trans, like the same way there's more trans kids in New York and California than there are in like Ohio.
Mhm.
It seems that in the more liberal, blue, or elite universities, there's somehow more the smartest universities that are hardest to get into. There's some more kids with learning disabilities, and as you said, in community colleges, or at, I think at schools, maybe in other parts of the country or state schools especially. So yeah.
So
Very
we're
interesting.
talking about the university level. Cap, are you seeing this because your kids are what, middle school age?
Well, that's what's interesting is I have a kid who's in 8th grade and a kid who's in 6th grade, and I did hear that this is something that's big in high schools in New York. We are currently touring high schools because in New York you have to apply to different high schools, and one of the schools they're breaking down the different criteria for the application process, and one of them casually mentioned that 25% of the seats are reserved for kids with disabilities. And for honestly, at first I thought, it meant like wheelchair accessibility, stuff like that. But no, it's learning disabilities they mean. And then I got excited because my son actually has a occupational therapist, which he gets through because of his handwriting. He inherited from me. Like in our day, I just had bad handwriting. I'm the son of a doctor. I look like a serial killer. You can't read the thing I wrote. I wrote a bunch of notes for today. I can't read any of them right now, I'm realizing.
Wow.
On point. But he inherited that. But in this day and age, you're like, that's actually something we can work on. So he's been going to a specialist for years, and we have.
Wow. Is there a name for that?
Just occupational therapy. They try to build up your hand muscle or whatever. But it's the same department as the learning disabilities. So I kept saying, like, let's not. When they say, is he better? I'd be like, don't write too good. We want you to, we want to help you get into a good high school. I thought this would help him. But lo and behold, I learned that he doesn't qualify. That's not the 25%.
Oh,
we're talking about.
Okay.
That doesn't work for us. No, can't get a loophole. So no, we are. And similarly in New York, I don't have a complete breakdown, but I read that in some school districts, it's like 5%. And then in some school districts, it's like 25%. And just to compare this, they said about 10%, 11% of the adult population has disabilities considered. So there's something out of whack here.
Yeah, the balance does seem to be out of whack. Reading the story, I see three possible possibilities arising from this. The totally good faith, no eyebrows raised argument or position would be, actually, all of these people do have disabilities, and this is a story of triumph, of people with disabilities being able to succeed in higher education, and conversely, through the American Disabilities Act and a lack of stigma, universities rising to the challenge and being able to accommodate the many people that have disabilities. However, given the very, very high amount of disabilities at top-tier universities compared to state schools and community colleges, that seems like an odd correlation. That you
could add a wrinkle, though, Heaton, that says these higher, and I think this might be true for trans kids in maybe coastal states, is that if you are in a fancier college, the college both has more resources, and your parents probably had more resources to recognize if you were struggling in school and get you a diagnosis or get you a treatment. And you also will probably see these schools with more resources have more capacity to encourage people to get tested once they're there, or just in general have more of a support system either before the university or after. So you could, again, this is, I'm not saying I believe this, but you could continue the good faith argument to say that actually does explain the discrepancy between higher ed in very fancy places and like state schools and community college.
Yes, that in fact the disabilities are underreported elsewhere.
Correct.
They have not been properly diagnosed or accommodated, and so it is a deficiency in the rest of the system rather than an imbalance at the top tier. But that is not my inclination. I think it's more my inclination is that it's one of the two following explanations. A, this is a way to rig the game, that families that have financial resources know that they can give their kids more test time if they have a disability, and they can get special allotments in terms of turning in papers later, or various other things that can give a competitive edge to them academically in order to get into a good school. And then once there, in order to get, primarily, one of the things it brings up in the article is extended time on tests compared to the rest of the general population. So it's in this iteration, it would be in the same way that 20 years ago, a ton of people all just got their doctor to write them a note saying their dog was an emotional therapy dog so they could fly with them. And it turned out that was not real. This is that at an academic level. And then
my dog just sighed heavily in the background and is grateful that she cannot be forced to pretend to be a service dog.
And by the way, real estate tip, that's if co-ops and an apartment cannot deny you if you have an emotional support dog. They can't say no dogs allowed, so get that note.
Okay, working on it.
That being said, though, Wallace, though very useful to me as a companion, would make a horrible support animal on a plane. I can't like might take the plane down at some point. And then the third possibility, which I think might actually be more disturbing, because the second one of this is a way to game the system, that pisses me off. It angers me because it's taking advantage of rules that were well-intentioned to help people that really need the help in order for upper middle-class people that tend to be the folks that get irritated and offended by me can continue to use their advantages in life. But the third possibility would be that it's not rigging the game, that in fact what we've done is pathologized a culture of disability to the point where incoming youth believe that they have a debilitating disability and that they cannot succeed unless they have an external authority change their external circumstances. And what worries me about that is I don't think if that's the case that we're doing them any favors. If they go into the job market and the private sector thinking, yep, you're sorry, you are going to always be limping in life and nothing will change for you unless you get special accommodation. Because I don't think that the private sector is going to be nearly as accommodating, or I should say just post-academic life. So I see those as the three options. Do anybody want to quibble with that? Does anybody see any other alternatives?
No, well, one thing I wanted to add is like in that third option you're bringing up, I think it's a big one to focus on, because like one of the examples in that article, they said that someone has a social anxiety disorder. They can get a note that says a teacher can't call on them without them not raising their hand. They can't put them in an uncomfortable spot where they just ask them a question.
Yeah.
Because and that's like, how are you going to have a job? What if your boss or a client or anybody, like you can't function in society if you can't only talk to people when you decide I want to talk to somebody.
Or like on the time constraints thing. Like part of the function of tests is you have a limited amount of time in which to do this. And I'm sure that there are extenuating circumstances for some people, but for the most part, though, you can't do that in most jobs, where if there's a deadline, there's some amount of wiggle room depending on the job you're in, but you can't just go allocations of time as a resource just doesn't count. That will become problematic later. So yeah, I'm with you, Kaplan, and I worry that we are going to coddle people and sort of make victimization a personality attribute and a source of moral authority. And I do not think that is at all helpful to people. I'm not saying if you've got a disability, I'm not saying it's your fault. And I'm also not saying that everybody should just lift themselves up by their bootstraps. But what I am saying is that I think telling people your travails in life are not under your control and are dependent on other people to fix for you is the worst advice you can give people.
I just want to say that as someone with anxiety and ADHD, I feel very attacked right now, and I need more time to complete this podcast. We're going to have to do this.
Couldn't you do a better job podcasting if you were allowed, like,
if I was allowed a full, I feel like you're pushing me along and I would like no one to call on me. No, I think, Heaton, I think that the way you divided it is sound and consistent with both my read of the article and also my experience teaching students with requests for accommodations like this. I think it's worth, kind of to your point, it's worth digging in a little bit on what kinds of disabilities we're talking about. And I mean, obviously this is not data that's freely available, but it's sort of to Kaplan's point. Are we asking about a little bit more time on an exam, or are we talking about you can, get up and walk around the classroom anytime you want. You don't have to come to class, and we're expected to provide the materials outside of class because you have social anxiety. You can't be called on. I would have students, it was very common in my classes. I can't speak in terrible detail about any particular cases just for privacy reasons, but I can say that the most common one was extra time on an exam. And in general, that one kind of raised my eyebrows less. Maybe I was just used to it. That was what I remember fellow classmates when I was in college were getting those accommodations. So maybe there were a little more, but okay. But there were other ones. We didn't have the no calling on in class, but we did have various versions of like, I can record the lecture. I get extensions on every single homework. There was one case where I wasn't allowed to give deadlines. The homework was just going to be turned in when it was going to be turned in.
To everybody or just to the students?
Just that particular student. And so part of me is like both we see more the trend seems like it's twofold. One is it's pretty clear that there are more students, especially these elite universities, who are getting these accommodations. But I wonder about what the proportion of those accommodations are and the extent to which they fall under what maybe we might traditionally classify as a, I don't even know if we use this wording, more quote unquote learning disability or a
Mobility
mental health
disability. Or,
thing.
okay, excuse me, mental health. Okay.
Yeah,
So
I mean, if I have
dyslexia
anxiety,
versus anxiety, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that there seem like, at what point am I accommodating someone for, depression or something? That never came up for me, but I'm just wondering where we're drawing the line.
Right, and it's also it's a matter of, you're right. Like, there are kids who will benefit from extra time. They just have trouble formulating. I mean, my son used to have someone write the questions for him. He used to have a person who would, if he had to write, he'd have to write it out.
Would write it for you.
And I always wondered, like, if the kid says something like really dumb, are they allowed to like make a face? Like, you sure you want to do that? Or like, but
if I were a proctor, I would
isn't
be heavy-handed for sure.
yeah, it is an advantage though, because you can say more things if you don't have to write it down, obviously, no matter what. But he had a legitimate issue. But then, yeah, you also have that. It's like steroids in like baseball, where if you don't want to cheat, but you're like, well, everyone else is doing it. It's the only way I can.
Right.
So then it's like, I need to get a learning disability, because I know if I had more time on that test, I might do good anyway, but I'm going to do even better. So
I wasn't diagnosed. I'm going to stop talking about this in a second, but I was diagnosed with ADHD like 2 years ago. So like in my 40s, and I didn't think it was real. And I finally was compelled to go get a test, and they were like, oh yeah. And so then I think about what accommodations my students have gotten, and I think about when I was taking tests and how, like, if one person in the lecture hall was like sneezing or coughing weird, I was like, well, I can't think, I can't do anything. So if I had been able to have, never mind extra time, but the extra time, people often get their own room and you get like a quiet environment, a low distraction, like I would have done way better. But to Heaton's point on the third reason, to what is the goal of these accommodations? Is it so that every student can succeed in the classroom? Of course we want that. Is it so we're setting people up for success in the rest of life? That's where I start to get worried. Never mind the rates. I start to get worried where it's like, okay, I can give you extra time, but the minute you graduate, no one's going to give you extra time. So I'm not sure what are we optimizing over, I think is the question. Though there is one more piece of the puzzle here, which is you could argue that employers will become hip to this and start offering more in the way of accommodations. I have my doubts. I haven't seen that in my wanderings through the corporate world, but you could imagine a version of the world where, there's more flexibility around deadlines for things, or we see it a little bit in terms of like, you don't have to clock in 9 to 5 as long as you get your thing done. There is a little bit of that in the corporate world. And you could make the argument that we shouldn't be more accommodating. We shouldn't be less accommodating to students in college. We should be more accommodating to professionals. I disagree with it, but you could make that argument.
That's an argument to make. I think I disagree with that as well. But we should cover all the grounds, do the good faith stuff. I think part of the intention behind what we're optimizing is what is the goal of the people in it. So getting back to category 2 of rigging the game in favor of me, I think it's I think college has become, it's a bunch of different things. It's all sorts of different reasons people go to college, but I'd say the primary one is credentialism. And if we're going to use colleges primarily as a credential factory that allows you to self-sort into your socioeconomic status for the rest of your life within our economy, then you're always going to have pressure to try to be the top one, because it's a zero-sum game for your placement of the class, for which university you can go to. It's going to be, you're either going to have inflation occur with grades, in which case you got to come up with new things. Everybody's going to get a master's now, or alternately, you're going to get left behind. And if the goal is education and knowledge, that's different. In which case, if the goal, like in the instance with your son, Kaplan, presumably the goal with giving him extra time in these situations was not so much trying to get him better test scores as to provide him more runway in order to absorb the knowledge that they wanted to get him to absorb. I follow that bit, but and
they want the teachers to be able to understand what he wrote, too.
Yeah,
so
it's
helping the teachers out too.
So then they can evaluate whether he's learning the material, and so
yeah,
fine.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But then on state tests, by the way, just so you know how that works, that when they have the state standardized tests, everybody just has to sit there and wait for the kids who have the timing exemption.
Oh, wow.
You can't go, it's like so.
Oh, that's
you
not
might
good.
as well use yeah. But
to go on your end, Andrea, as somebody that's taught in higher ed, what does your gut tell you on this? You've had students that have had disability exemptions and accommodations. I kind like in the case of most of these higher ed places, at least in the article, the implication is very strongly that it's gaming the system. I would say that the interpretation of the author is this is the new. This is basically the academic version, or the I don't know, a parallel version of legacy admissions for affluent families. That affluent families can go, oh, if I pick Dr. Feelgood and write my kid a prescription for a diagnosis for ADHD, they get a 10% bump for the rest of their lives academically. So we're going to do this. This is a way to give my kid an advantage. That was the read, I think, from the Atlantic article. If we were to go with like Greg Lukianoff or Jonathan Haidt, I think they would be in general more in the camp of no, we've basically taught everybody to be delicate, and that this is deleterious to them long term. But you were interacting with them, you were teaching them. What did you make of it?
I mean, it's difficult to say, just in the sense that, my interactions one-on-one with students, it was a large lecture class. And so what that meant was I got a lot of these requests, not at the percentages that where the article is describing, but I got a lot of these requests, and it was not always the case that I was interacting one-on-one with every student to the extent where I might be able to actually observe whether I thought they needed this. And also in interaction face-to-face, it gives me no information as to what's going on in their brain or what sorts of things are happening. So, and I'm certainly not equipped to diagnose anybody. All of those caveats aside, I would say this is very rough. I would say probably a third to half struck me as legitimate. I would get, and some of that is my own bias, because if the request was simply more time on an exam, I'm just so used to it because it was so common I had been teaching, including being a TA since, before Obama was elected. And so I've been giving extra time for exams since then. So maybe it's a little bit more, but I don't notice it. It doesn't register. It was in the recent years, COVID also adds some complications. But it was in the recent years when I felt like the asks were getting bigger. Like I need more things. I need more time. I need more extensions. I need to be able to, I didn't get this in particular, but eventually it felt like many students were requesting the opportunity to negotiate with me over what was required in the course. And I think of myself as a fair teacher. I have the opening syllabus and I say, here's what I'm going to grade you on, and here's how you need to do it, and here's what the rules are. And I don't change those rules later. But I did feel the presence of some bad faith negotiation. And it was very tricky because disability is something that is very serious if it's real. And I want to respect that. And I want students to be able to succeed. And I'm happy to do what I need to do that. But if I feel like if it's not in good faith, which is something of a gut feeling, it's frustrating because I am in no position to push back. Like I would get requests that say, we need indefinite time on a homework, as opposed to a 2-day extension for the 5 assignments that we had this semester. And I would think, that's not ideal, because part of the reason, as an educator, part of the reason that I assign the homeworks and I give the deadline is so that you get a chance to practice what we just talked about, and then I can see if everyone's understood it. And then when we move on, I can say, people struggled with this on the homework, let's go over it again, or da-da-da. And so if you're out of step with the class in a big way, and your homeworks are all piling up, then that's bad for you. So I pushed back. And I said, I don't love the idea of just open-ended non-deadlines for the student. Like, what if we said 48 hours? Or what if we said, normally homeworks are due on Thursday, you have until Sunday. And we just sort of set that up. And then if you need a particular homework assignment accommodation further extension, get in touch with me ahead of that deadline. That was my proposal. And the pushback was, oh, you're discriminating against people with disabilities. And so there was no room for that. And I'm not saying that I knew what this student needed, and I'm not saying that I am in a position to evaluate these sorts of things, but I found it very concerning that we weren't able to have a good faith conversation about what would serve the students. It was more that any pushback was an accusation of ableism.
Was the pushback from the kid or from their parent, or who was the one who's...
I luckily never interacted with parents, but I know faculty who do hear from parents. And at the college level, I just don't think you should ever be hearing from parents. I heard from some prospective student parents about other things, but not about that.
That's what I was curious about, because I do think, just going back to what I know, it's like I see it with the application process for high schools. And they have there's this standardized, specialized test that you have to take for the best schools in New York City. Mom Donnie might get rid of this, but for now. And I've seen, because I'm on these Facebook groups with these people, and these people are these parents get on there. They're like, it was really loud in my kid's thing. How do we get another chance? Or some kid was being distracting, or an alarm went off by accident, or they have all these excuses.
Right.
They've already decided their kid didn't do good enough.
Right.
Because he told him something. And I'm just wondering if how much of this disability is like parents who put this crazy stress on or who want to find an advantage or find something wrong with their kid to help them.
I mean, and this gets to kind of explanation camp 3 that Heaton was describing, which is, we've sort of pathologized or made it seem like everybody is disadvantaged in some way. And maybe that does come from parents. That could very well be
elite parents.
The version that the pushback would come for us would be every time we get an accommodation request, it doesn't come directly from the student. At least this was the case where I was teaching. It doesn't come directly from the student. The student submits or takes a test or has some kind of certification, doctor's note, whatever, to the Center for Academic Accommodations. The Center for Academic Accommodations then sends a form letter to us, the professors, indicating what the accommodations are and how to do them. And then they say, if you have any questions, get back in touch. And so normally it would just say something that I'm used to, like 2x time on an exam, or often was just 1.5x time on an exam. You say, okay, if it started to get beyond that, and if I really felt like it was either something that I wasn't sure how to do or felt like would do a student a disservice, like they don't have to do any homework or something like that, that was never one. I would then reply to the academic center office, CCing the student. So you're always in communication with this kind of central authority. And where things would get tricky is that then sometimes the student would pull off of that thread and try to contact me directly to talk about this. And that's where I felt a bit uncomfortable, because this is like a legally protected category, because I'm not licensed to diagnose or clarify what anyone with a disability needs. And because this is something that's happening under the guidance of the university telling me I ought to do this for the student, I would then say, okay, I'd feel better if we looped in the your counselor or whatever so we could talk about this. And then sometimes the students would get upset, like, well, I'm supposed to be advocating for myself. You don't trust me, blah, blah, blah. And it would kind of spiral off into this ugly thing where it's like, I just want to do it above board. And it would, it's like you're working with lawyers and then you're like, why don't we just deal with this outside of insurance? And you're like, I don't feel great about that.
Yeah, that sounds like a recipe for abuse.
It was bad.
So if we assume that, unless surveilled and having checks in place, students will engage in plagiarism or cheating, that's not something that we rely on the honor system to mitigate, but that there need to be mechanisms in place because students, for whatever reason, will feel pressured to break the rules in order to get ahead academically. This is another opportunity to either get time extensions on tests or work, and therefore the same bad actors that could potentially plagiarize or cheat would be prone to do this. And it doesn't seem to me like there's any way to push back. Based on all the conversations we've had, Andrea, if you are in higher ed and somebody accuses you of an ism, drop everything. Like you're going to get in trouble. This is now a make or break thing. You're going to wind up in the New York Post. You're going to get canceled, have to become a right-wing podcaster,
especially if it's Zionism.
So like in these, like I'm guessing if somebody got into it and was like, you're being ableist, like that's kind of the end of the story, I would imagine.
It's the end of the story.
Yeah.
I mean, and I'm interested that you brought up, cheating and plagiarism, because that happened as well, unrelated to accommodations and disabilities, but we would have issues where we would catch students cheating. They turn in the same homework, with ChatGPT. That obviously became a totally different thing, depends on the policy. But, we would catch people referring to notes in exams. People had devices out in exams and weren't supposed to have. Homeworks were identical. Sometimes we would even release multiple versions of the same homework or exam with like numbers changed. And so if your numbers looked like something, and we were doing this because there was so much cheating. And particularly during COVID, all the exams were async, off, online, open book, fine, but as long as you're not collaborating with someone else. Anyway, so we caught all kinds of people cheating. And if students made enough of a fuss, the university would ultimately always take their side. And so even the attempt to say, hey, our policy says if we catch you plagiarizing or cheating in one of these ways and there's evidence, then you get a 0 for the assignment or you get a 0 for the exam or whatever it was that we caught you cheating on. If they put up enough of a fuss, I'm going through an emotional whatever. Oh, I felt stressed and da-da-da. And we would say, sorry, you still, that's the penalty. If they then appealed it and it went to the dean would almost always side with them. The most flagrant one that was really upsetting for me is we had a policy in our major that was if you're caught cheating in 2 courses, you're out of the major. You can't major if you we caught you, one professor caught you over here, and then later another professor caught you over there. Like one time already bad, but 2. And it happened one time. And so we said, all right, the policy is you're no longer able to major in this. And again, it went to the dean and the dean sided with the student. And so then you start to think, well, what kind of game are we playing here? And it plays back into this idea of college as sort of this like customer service
it's changed
activity where if you're kind of loud enough as the customer, you're going to get the rebate and the discount and the refund and the A and all of this. And so
Customer's
that
always
begs a
right.
broader question. I think all of this marries together, and it's one of the many reasons I left academia is, again, what is it that we're trying to do here? And what is going on that students feel this kind of pressure that they need to game the system? And Cap, I'm horrified by what you said about why do parents think they need to argue with each other on Facebook about whether or not the room was too loud? And then why did students feel like if they don't get an A, their lives are over? Like, is it because of employers and job scarcity? Is it because of some kind of drummed up perception? I think there is a broader illness afoot that is incentivizing students to be like this, incentivizing them to cheat, incentivizing them to say they have ADHD when they don't. And that I don't know how to solve.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I can tell you
I'm not going to yell at my kid.
I can tell you my Go ahead, Kaplan. What'd you say?
No, I was saying, I guess you're right. I should not yell at my kids when they get a bad grade then. So that's going to,
yeah, you should be breaking down the door of the principal's office and demanding that they accommodate them. I think my 2 big problems with academia at this time in the United States are, A, I think it is primarily a credentialing system rather than a knowledge promulgation center. And B, we have I think 90% of the problems in America right now are supply and demand, where no one understands how supply and demand works. And if you stoke demand and you don't increase supply, so if you're giving out lots of student loans through grants, primarily through the federal government, you're not increasing the supply of teaching capacity, you are going to cause inflation. So those are the 2 big problems I have with it. My solution for both is twofold, by the way, and this is nuts and it's never going to happen, but I think it would solve a lot of the problems,
Burn them all down.
I think that undergraduate universities should be free. And we don't give out diplomas. Like, we don't do that with libraries. We don't go, you have to be this smart to get into the library, because that would be horrible in classes. We're going to, if as a society, we're going to keep saying everybody should have these foundational liberal arts beliefs. It's so important that everybody go to university. It's so important that everybody go to college. Great. Fine. I'm all on board with that. But then let's establish that what we're trying to do is promulgate the knowledge, not get everybody their tier in a caste system. So let's just treat it like libraries.
No knowledge.
Fund everything. have it. Lottery-based system if you want to get in, and then use the professional associations for the credentialing. Like the bar association does the test to get in and become an attorney. This is never going to happen, by the way, but I think it would solve a lot of the problems.
Do you think the grade inflation is part of the issue too, Andrea? Like, I feel like when I was in college, I mean, I was partying the whole time, but I felt like if I got if my GPA was if you were a 3.2 to a 3.5 or somewhere, you did really well.
Yeah.
And now I feel everyone's a 4.0 at these colleges, right? And it's
it's a serious problem, and the A- students are the angriest students in the world. And a lot of people would say, oh, you worried about the D students, the F students writing you a bad
they're happy.
review.
They're having fun.
They're cool. I want to hang out with the D students. It's the A- students, the people who got an 88. And yes, I'll round up if you have an 89.5, but an 88 is a B+, and I'm sorry. And so the grade inflation was a huge problem, and the grade grubbing became out of control. And I don't know if it's, I switched over the years that I was teaching. I switched, across different universities, slightly different fields, therefore students with slightly different goals. I went from teaching more political science, international relations, to students who wanted to be lawyers, to teaching data science, to students who wanted to go work for Zuckerberg or Musk or something like that. And so maybe that is what caused the change. But I saw way more grade grubbing, way more quibbling, okay, you got 25 out of 30 on this homework. I should have gotten 25.5. Finally, I had to actually put a moratorium on grades lower than 1 point, because I had someone argue that they should have gotten a 25.25 because one of their answers was 25% of the correct answer as opposed to the correct answer. So even just grading like, no, you either got the question right or wrong was this huge controversial thing. And I just got very, very worn down because I'm trying to teach you stuff that I think is important and interesting and helps you be a better citizen. And you want to argue with me about whether or not, you should have said bell curve or normal distribution, which are very different. And it was just not how I want to live my life. And so, yeah, there was very much this sense that like, if I didn't get a 4.0, I would not get into the graduate school that I want to go to, and that for some reason I think that I needed. Maybe it's a legitimate reason. I will also say that on the other side of it, I have spent a fair amount of time on the admissions committee for master's programs for people who are coming up, mostly seniors in college who are finishing and they're applying to go to a master's. And the number of applications I saw where students took the same class a second time, and these are largely from elite universities.
To improve their grades?
To improve their grades, because the second grade is the one that gets calculated into the GPA. And you look at everything, right? When they're applying. And so you look at the overall GPA, that's almost meaningless to me if, above, I would say a 3, let's say. I'm much more interested in what sorts of classes did you take? What kind of things are you interested in? What kind of projects did you do? So you skip immediately to the transcript itself. And if I see the same class more than once and I can see, oh, you went from like a B+ to an A, like, fuck you. I mean, I wouldn't say that to the students, but like, no.
Yeah,
I'd be much more impressed by a student who said, oh, I got a B+, but then I took the next level course and still got a B+, but I'm still trying to figure this out. Or I switched to a totally different field. Like there's also a growth of students, and some of this was COVID related, was at least at many universities, the policy during some of the deepest COVID, teaching online, hybrid. Oh my God. Sorry, my dog barked. Teaching online era was you could take courses pass-fail. And so you didn't get an A, B, C, you just either passed or you failed it. And the number of it was instantly abused, because if you think you're going to get anything less than an A or maybe an A-, you instantly would switch to pass-fail. So I would read these transcripts of students who 10 of their courses were taken pass-fail. And normally you're limited in the number that you can do, but there were a few years where you could just do as much as you want. And then I would have students, my own students, who would email me and say, hey, I'm really worried about my grade in this class. It's maybe, 2 weeks before the end of the semester. They haven't taken the final exam, but they've done everything else. And I have a sense of how they're doing. They'll email me and say, hey, I want you to sign this form so that I can switch to pass-fail and thus get pass-fail. And I would try to, I was like, you have, I'm just going to keep using this number. I was like, you have an 88. Do not go pass-fail. Like, pass-fail looks worse to people, even if you would rather just get the P than a
suspicious
B on your... And so it just really... Most of my energy ended up going towards grade issues in the end. And one of the other things, and I could talk about this for ages, but one of the other things I can say is that early on in my career, I was tenure track and I was thinking I would continue. I left tenure track before I went up for tenure, so this isn't coming from a place of bitterness. I'm bitter about many things, but not that. So I was tenure track, and I wanted, my job was to get really good teaching evaluations. Teaching evaluations don't matter as much as research, but they could harm you, and so you want really good. And I was also, earlier in my career, I was teaching higher level courses. I was teaching advanced international relations, so I wasn't teaching the big lectures because more senior people teach the big lectures. So I'm teaching seminars. And so I have zero incentive to give anyone anything but an A. In my classes for years, you would get an A as long as you did the work. You could turn in the worst paper ever. You could get half the questions right on the midterm and you'd probably end up in an A-. If it's truly, I would end up with a distribution that looked okay, because there'd be a couple of students who would just disappear and wouldn't turn anything in. So you're like, okay, so it doesn't look like why would I ever not give everyone a high grade if my job is to continue having this job, and the way that I'm going to do that is having students who are happy with me? Later, I was teaching as a visiting professor. I wasn't looking to have a long-term career in academia. I just thought that teaching this stuff was important. And I was teaching an intro course in methods, which meant that if the students didn't learn what I was teaching, which is statistics, programming, back when we did that, and working with data, they actually had to learn these things, because then they would be really fucked in later semesters. So I had to, and then later professors would say, you gave these students A's, no one can do anything, what's going on? So I no longer had an incentive to give everyone A's. I wasn't being unfair. I was being very consistent with the school mean, but I just got hate mail Like, I hate mail. And you're just like, we're already being very generous. It's not like I'm grading unfairly. Like I review if you have a grade complaint. I'm happy to change your grade if we misgraded you, but you just literally didn't answer the question correctly. Like, I don't know what to tell you. And somehow I'm
Such
getting
a different
essays
world
about
than
how
the
it's
college
ruining
we went
lives.
to.
Just absolutely out of control. And so every incentive for me, if I did care about long-term teaching, trying to be on the tenure track again, I had no incentive to keep grades down.
Wait, I got a dumb question. This
Please.
seems like you could fix this reasonably well by having teacher evaluations take place before grades are given. Could you just do that?
They are done before grades are given. It's about your expected grade.
Yeah.
Got
And
it.
so
If I'm
how
at
you've
an
done on your
85,
assignments.
I know I'm not getting an A.
We had a TA once. I remember this writing class sophomore year, and she was so hard. Like a kid once, she would automatically give you a grade down if you were late. I once got a flat tire. I was coming back from my girlfriend's in New York. Got a flat tire on the highway. The paper was done. I had it with me. Hands in late. I showed her the receipt. She didn't care. Another kid said his grandmother died, and she's like, I need to see the death certificate or something, like evidence you were at a funeral. She was really hard. And then I remember she gave us really hard grades, pop quizzes, all sorts of stuff. And then she comes over one day and goes, I just want to tell you, everybody, that was the way I get you the best out of you. But your grades are actually going to be much higher than what you thought. And then she proceeds to hand us out the evaluations. And I literally wrote in the evaluation, she just tried to bribe us.
Yeah.
I quoted the death certificate thing, everything. I was like, she's a maniac. She just found out, I guess. But
yeah,
that's
no,
crazy.
there's a massive
it doesn't make sense. You're right. The model.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
and there's a lot of research that shows that teaching evaluations are not informative and not helpful and not reflective.
They're more about
I've
who's
certainly never
likable.
used it. I've never gotten anything that was like, hey, if you taught it this way, it would be helpful. Or, hey, if you taught it that way, it's just not set up to get good feedback on what would be useful. Like in the moment, maybe the way to do it is to say, hey, this example was really helpful. Like if you could always give a second example for these really hard things, that'd be good. Like fine. But the teaching evaluations serve only as a reflection of their personal assessment of you in terms of whether or not you ruined their life.
So far, all of this conversation is making me lean more towards the people abusing the system than people internalizing disabilities as a core identity trait, and making me double down on my college should be free, but also nobody gets a diploma position.
Yeah.
To your point, so me not being a professor or a parent, I don't have a lot of direct insight into this, but being an elder millennial, I come in and I graduate before whatever happened to Gen Z. So there's something that happens in 2008, between 2008 and 2010, where there's all these different data correlations where reading declines, hanging out with friends after school declines. I'm before that. But I did get in when we went into the everybody's a winner, everybody gets a participation trophy era. I'm part and parcel of that. So my high school I'm a valedictorian. Just in case anybody was worried, I'm a valedictorian.
Wow.
Can we see that speech?
As were 12 other students in my class.
Oh.
And that's not including the salutatorians. And the way we did it at Deer Creek Public High School was it was on a 4-point scale unless you were in an honors class, in which case it was on a 5-point scale. So I graduated with, on a 4-point scale, I graduated with like a 4.8 or something like that. And putting myself back in that mindset, I wouldn't have said this so bluntly, nor would I have been capable of emotionally articulating it at the time. But myself and my cohort that was in the honors class had been told our entire lives, and in high school and in college in particular, we are the Messiah generation. We are the future. We are going to save the world. We are so amazing, and we're used to being in these gifted classes, and we are intrinsically plus A students. So if we're not getting the A, you have deprived us of our rightful role in life. This is what I am. I am this person.
Right.
And you were taking this from me by virtue of this. And so, all of this leads me back to this seems to be kind of how do I rig it more than
I think it's mostly rigging. I do think there are some people, not just students, who are doing the I am a victim of everything and every hardship I've had means I should get things easier. I think that is
it also gives you an identity. It's
right.
your thing. I think that's what you see a lot of kids now. That's what I made the joke about the trans thing earlier, but it's like if you don't have that, if you don't, you want something.
Right.
that becomes your identity. I
Right.
have this learning disability. I have to talk about it constantly. I have to post about it constantly.
Right. My
Pay
experience
attention
is
to
there
me.
was
Yeah.
less of that in coming up. I think that's an ingredient, but I'm with Heaton that I think the second one is much more likely the case. The problem, however, is that there probably is some truth to explanation category 1, which is we are doing a better job of diagnosing real debilitating things. Like, if someone truly can't sit still or can't focus and needs extra time, like, it's sort of like autism rates have gone up because we're better at noticing if someone has autism, right? And there are students who genuinely...
I thought it was the vaccine.
Right.
Yes.
And there are students who genuinely,
And Tylenol,
have dyslexia or have serious issues. And so it's kind of reminds me of the mental health conversations a long time ago where it was like, oh, are you a little bit sad? You must have clinical depression. And it's like, not only is that not fair to you and makes you think that you're a victim, but it's also not fair to people who really have clinical depression.
But now if you actually are a little bit sad because some guy cheated on you or whatever, you can go to get a learning disability out of it, or get, in college, you can get an extension on your paper or something. So
yeah, I'm glad.
Were you, I have a question.
Yeah.
Were you, of the 12 valedictorians, are you the most famous now? Do you have the last laugh?
Well, one of us killed a guy, so he got.
Was it you?
I'm joking. No,
Oh.
no one ever caught me for that. Maybe
Yeah.
I think I am. I'm.
There
I
you
don't want to
go.
get too
So
big
you're
for
the
my
last laugh.
britches here, but I think I am
Ball don't lie.
internet. What am I? Internet micro pseudo celebrity, I believe, is the status I'm at. I'm now at
Micro
the point I get-
pseudo celebrity.
I
Wow.
get recognized about once a month, and I
There
love
you go.
it. I was at an
Deal.
event in Edinburgh and had a beautiful woman with me, and a guy came up and was like, "Hey, I am such a huge fan," and I was like, "Just stop. Can you turn about 20 degrees to your left so that she can hear you say that? Okay, repeat all of that
Yeah.
stuff right back."
Right.
then I
And use
bought him a
my
beer.
full name just so she knows
my
that
full
you're not
name.
mistaking me for something else.
Yeah.
And quote this one episode so she knows I didn't put you up to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But to your point, Andrea, I do think that's part of it. You're right. The better diagnosis, like by the time I got around, schools rightly were identifying dyslexia. But you hear horror stories from my parents'
Yeah.
generation, where
Yeah.
in the 50s and 60s, if you had dyslexia, you were just an idiot, and the teacher would get mad
that
at you
is
because
the
you were,
other extreme is that the old days, if you just had any sort of disability, it was just
it was just
a pox on you.
You were just lazy.
Right. Dumb.
If you were just
Right.
if you just
Yeah.
were less lazy, you'd be. And it's like, well, no, that's not the same thing. So there does need to be some wiggle room for that. But I think whenever you're designing any of these systems, in any given system, you have to assume that somebody's going to abuse the system, and therefore you have to program that in. So weirdly, though, I did not think we would talk about this at all. Kaplan bringing up trans issues. When I was in Scotland a few years ago, Scotland had just passed legislation saying that if you are trans, you get to go to the prison of your choice based on how you identify. And when they did that, I was like, that's a horrible idea. Not because I think trans are more likely to be rapists, but because I think rapists probably don't have a lot of compulsion about lying about being trans.
Yes.
So
Exactly.
you have-
Particularly convicted felon
Yes.
rapists.
Convicted felons in general don't mind
Yeah,
lying
yeah.
about their identity.
Even
if it's gonna help them.
non-rapist convicted
Yeah.
felons, I wouldn't
Exactly.
feel great. Because I feel like, I don't know, but I feel like if I were given the choice, I would choose a woman's prison.
Yeah,
Just,
hands down.
yeah.
Hands down. I mean,
Hands down.
Yeah.
I'm choosing the women's prison.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think a lot of those
Showering's a little more pleasant.
I mean, this goes back to this is why we can't have nice things. It's because people will game whatever
people-
system,
Yeah.
But I think you're right, Heaton, that I think building in some kind of check or safeguard would be a way around this. And
So what are the disabilities besides it's ADHD, obviously, which I feel like I would have been diagnosed if we had it. There's anxiety. Are there any other? Is there a fourth category?
Well, they don't tell us the disability when they which would have been fun.
Well, because I'm asking as
Just
my
in
son
general.
I was talking about earlier doesn't have a disability. Apparently, writing like a serial killer is not a disability. But the to get into high school, they do these tiers in New York City. So even though you talk about grade inflation, he was a 93 average last year, 93 and a half, but that's tier 2. He's not tier 1.
Yeah.
It's the top 15%. So that made it harder for him to get into high school. I realized the best school. So I got to do better as a parent for college. So I've got 4 years to get him a disability.
Oh, I
So
see,
I'm
yeah.
learning.
Yeah, Kaplan.
So I want you guys to help me come up with one
I'm
before.
curious about this, Kaplan, on your end. Do you feel pressure to do you feel that your son is in a competitive environment in terms of getting into the high school of his choice or eventually the college of his choice? Do you feel if you do not enter this arms race on his behalf, even if it's not legitimate, that he will fall behind and thus you were compelled to do so? What are your thoughts?
I mean, yes, that's a great question. most of this process, I'm pretty chill about it. I think, high school, I don't care if you go to the top high school in the country based on U.S. News, World Report, whatever. Like, I don't think it's going to matter. I know there is a system where, like, if you're in that high school, you have a better chance of getting into a better college because of the way this whole elite world works. But I kind of just want to have a normal high school experience. But so I do make fun of the process at every turn. But yet, one of the schools, so this is what's interesting. Some of these schools require essays. And one of them was in person this year. They made it in person because and they said, we're going to have a lot less applicants because essentially everyone's using ChatGPT and cheating. And they wanted to have less applications and make it easier to know, obviously, people aren't cheating. So he did one in person, but one of them was not in person. It was literally writing just why you want to go to school, whatever. And he wrote an essay out. And I was about to help him submit it. And then I'm looking at it. I'm like, I'm going to copy edit a little bit. I'm going to proofread this a little bit. And then I'm like, you know what would be one good line to add? So next thing you know, I'm helping with you. And I don't want to be that helicopter parent, but I can't help. It's like he's got my name on it. But I will say that's one I read somewhere that the essay actually doesn't matter. It's more of just like submitting it is like you had to go through that hurdle. Yeah. Basically, it's a participation essay. So I don't. But yeah, I could see the appeal of the parent. These other parents spend thousands of dollars on programs for the standardized tests. They do all sorts of things. And it's like an arms race. It's like you say, I don't want to be part of it. But then it's like, well, you don't want your kid to fall behind, So
I mean, standardized tests are another one. And that's been the case since we were all in college, which is that it just doesn't seem like it measures what we are trying to measure. And more often than not, I think you're just measuring whether a student had access to some kind of test prep program.
I'm very proud, by the way. I took the SAT test prep, the Kaplan course, and people thought I was a spy. And I had such ADD that my score didn't improve at all. I think I went up 10 points or something from when I took it before it. But that's just because I didn't try. I didn't apply myself.
You know what? But yeah, Andrea, that is literally what happened with me. So I was on the gifted track. Now, granted, it had been a couple of years. I think when I was in ninth grade, so freshman year, if you were gifted, they'd let you take the ACT anyway. And I got like a 24. And then kept taking prep courses, had a CD-ROM, got it up to a 30. Now, maybe that would have increased to some extent between my freshman year and my senior year on its own, but a 6-point jump is pretty significant on a 30-point or a 35-point scale, I think.
Something like that, yeah.
And so, like that was like, it wasn't like we were throwing crazy money at it in Edmond, Oklahoma, but like definitely had enough resources and enough parental support to do that. So I'm curious as to what we could do to rectify this. So we seem to all agree there's a poor incentive structure here. I could talk a little bit about policy because I think policy plays into this from the congressional level. But before I do that, Andrea, having been in higher ed, if you could see policies put in place that would free the hands of professors to not have to give an A or to accommodate everything, or to remove some of the pressure on students so they don't do this, or whatever the thing is, what would you want to do?
I have kind of two areas, I guess, and this wouldn't fall under governmental policy, I don't think, but I do. I spend a fair amount of time working with companies who try to use data to evaluate performance and talent. And so I do think that part of the reason we're all in this race and students feel like they need A's and all of that is because they're trying to get a job, and I unfortunately correctly know that many employers, particularly in the tech space or other places that seem attractive, kind of sexy jobs of the day, are very cutthroat, and they do want to see that you got A's in technical, mathematical, statistical, computer science courses. And so I think part of it comes down to the fact that the way that companies are evaluating talent in terms of new hires is actually very terrible, because what they think they want are students who got A's in computer science at an Ivy League university. And maybe they want that, but they don't want only people who have that, because then you're going to have an army of people who all solve problems the same way. And I'm not trying to sneak in a diversity argument in here, but I am trying to sneak in an argument, or not even sneak in, just say the argument that talent in a field doesn't look like being the tallest tree in the singular forest. It can look like being really, really good at all kinds of other things, because that could make you a really helpful team member. Just like you wouldn't assemble a soccer team that's only the best goalies in the world. You shouldn't assemble an engineering team that's only the best engineering students in the world. So I think some of the pressure on students comes from the fact that they genuinely are, if they want to make a living, and the cost of living has gone up, and there is a lot of competition for certain jobs. I think that would be a way out of it, is to sort of just change how we evaluate what a good student looks like after they leave college. Then the other one is, I think teaching evaluations are terrible and they should be gotten rid of. I think they should not be offered. I think I would like some mechanism by which students can say, hey, this is working and this isn't. And maybe that's more of a periodic check-in before in the first half of the semester or something like that, or some way for students to, because there really are professors who are very bad, or they say that they're going to grade this way and they grade that way, and there should be some oversight. Maybe that means that our colleagues, we attend each other's courses or something like that. I am not convinced that students with that, as one of my colleagues would always remind me, who do not have a fully developed prefrontal cortex have a fair understanding of what's gone well in a course and what hasn't. And then the other piece that we haven't talked about here is that often the experience of learning is not itself pleasant. You go to the gym and you have a personal trainer. You think you want a personal trainer who's going to make it fun and not have to work hard and nothing is hard. But what you want is a personal trainer who's nice and supportive and also pushes you to do things you think you can't do. But the way that we've assigned, the way that we invite feedback is completely flawed. And so it incentivizes this
and
serving
I think we need
the tech overlords, basically, who are demanding that our students have 4.0s.
No, and I was going to say, and I blame, to your analogy there, back to what we were saying earlier, I think that the parents are part of the problem there. It's like, because like my kid, you go to all these different sports. You said soccer, I'm thinking about the soccer, and everyone's all warm and fuzzy.
Mm-hmm.
And then he's got a baseball team he plays on now up in northern Queens, where it's like the coach is like this old New York guy, just screams at them, makes them run if they do anything wrong, and it's like, and some parents might not like that, but I love it. I think it's great. Like they need some of that. Like they need that in teaching as well. They need like some teachers who are just like, you get a bad grade and it's not even just because they're really hard, and it's just like part of. Yeah. And then maybe if I don't know if you think about this, but like if it wasn't the GPA, maybe it's more just like a tier. Like anyone, so I don't know the specifics. If you got a 3.6 and you got a 3.7, you're just all
right.
I don't know. Like put it more because I feel like that's a lot of this issue. It's like everyone wants to keep up.
The more fine-grained we make the grades, the more there is to quibble over. I think that's a fair. Do I have an 87 or an 86 or an 80 whatever? Maybe we all just go back to pass-fail. Maybe that
pass-fail. Yeah, not the pass-fail because that's a little too extreme.
Pass-medium-fail.
Again, at the university level, I don't know that I'm wholly opposed to that based on what I said earlier. I'll say on the policy angle, I think part of what has begot the current system for disabilities is congressional. So a lot of the time on my show and other shows that I go on, I bemoan Congress not doing things. There's some clear problem, and it ends up going to the courts, and the courts have to solve it. And the courts basically go, look, we don't even know how to do this. This is something Congress really should fix. With the tariff case going on right now in the Supreme Court, the argument the Trump administration is making is, look, if this is illegal, Congress can stop us at any time. We're operating within our interpretation of the statutes written by Congress. If they disagree with us, just have them rewrite it. That's because Congress doesn't do anything. This is one of the rare instances where Congress did something and screwed up. Rather than doing its job, it stepped up and did its job poorly. So the American Disabilities Act comes out in 1980, I believe, and it originally was designed largely around mobility or profound problems that were associated with some kind of disability that would otherwise preclude you from doing it. But
you need a ramp, you need
right.
wheelchair ramps, elevators,
yeah.
things like exactly, or somebody's deaf and the university hires an interpreter for them that they can do things like that, right? In between 1980 and 2008, there were a number of court cases where people attempted to redefine disability, and the court went, no, we're not going to do that. So Sutton versus United Airlines in 1999, twin sisters applied to become airline pilots, and they were rejected because they didn't have uncorrected 20/100 vision. And because they had,
which is kind of important in a pilot.
Yeah, because they had eyewear, they went, well, we have disabilities. You can't discriminate.
Oh my God!
Us. And the courts went, no, that's ridiculous. You can't say that requiring eyewear would make you disabled. Were you to do that, that would automatically be 43 million America, or like 43% of Americans, something like that. Obviously, Congress didn't intend that. Then in Toyota Motor Manufacturing versus Williams in 2002, there was a worker that had carpal tunnel syndrome, which I think there's more to it this time. They had carpal tunnel syndrome, and they weren't able to do their job. They got fired, and they took them to court, and the court ruled this does not preclude you from working in general. It's a specific thing that you're unable to do in terms of discharging your duties. So this is not discrimination because you could go do something else. And I think that they had a point there, but that was where the
Well,
court
it's sort of
ruled.
like if your job is to lift heavy boxes and put them somewhere else,
Yes.
you're not disabled if you're not strong enough to lift heavy boxes and put them somewhere else.
Exactly. Yes, that's well put. Well put. In Miners v. Cargill Communications, it's 1997, an employee got fired for drunk driving and tried to argue that they had a disability called alcoholism, and that because
I love this.
Now we're cooking. Now we're
because they were
cooking.
an alcoholic, you cannot discriminate against me. I legitimately, I did not choose to have alcoholism. It is something that I struggle with. You firing me is taking advantage of a disability. The court,
I'm for them.
The court ruled that you do not have to, employers do not have to tolerate misconduct caused by a disability. So if you have a disability, like let's say you have depression or you have bipolar disorder and you scream at your customers, even though that might be something that broadly qualifies as a disability, the employer does not have to put up with the misconduct of it. And then finally, in 2001, PGA Tour versus Martin, there was a golfer that had a leg disability and wanted to have a golf cart, and the PGA Tour initially would not provide a golf cart for them and said, look, walking is a part of golf.
That's part of professional golf.
Yes, and they argued, no, it's just hitting the ball. And the Supreme Court had a lively debate over what constitutes golf.
I love it.
And I think they actually sided with the golfer, I believe.
I love it debating. Is golf a sport, essentially, is what they're saying.
No, that was
Scalia.
Scalia had a field day with that. So that's
so good.
So between 1980 and 2008, Congress defined something that has some ambiguity in it, and the courts pretty systematically went on the more restrictive interpretation of the ADA Act. Then in 2008, there was an amendment to the ADA Act, which really, really broadened the term, whereas previously it had been like, this is something, that's a very specific thing that is absolutely deleterious to worker education and will otherwise preclude your membership in it. They expanded it to be things that seriously impact your ability to have an education. And so it went from, I can't get into the building because there's no ramp, to, well, does your disability affect your ability to get education? At which point the doors were blown open very widely. And we're seeing all of this now because part of the reason, Andrea, that you probably cannot inveigh against some of the disability claims are not just the culture around it, but also you might run afoul of the ADA. And there are federal prohibitions that they have to take into account.
Yep.
God,
yeah, it's not just being canceled or something, moral authority. It's a genuine legal issue. Yeah. Yeah. I didn't know that was the cause, and it's pretty consistent with a lot of the timing that we're talking about as well.
It's funny too, because it also, like, again, 2008 to 2010, there's this.
Was that Bush in president still?
Bush signed into law. No one voted against this. In the House of, I don't know if this is combining the House and this. I think the Senate was unanimous. I think in the House, all but
bipartisanship fails once again.
All but 17 people voted for it. Because did you want to be the jackass that was voting against disabled
Everyone's
people?
got kids.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And when they had
sounds harmless.
When people were advocating for it, everybody that showed up was in a wheelchair. Like, do you really want to be the dick that but they're conflating the two because they're expanding the definition. And
so does that affect the ability to drunk drive now? And wait, what was it?
I don't because I don't know.
Be an airport. Do you have to be able to see to be a pilot still, or is that a?
I honestly, I don't know. I would think those would still be in effect, but I'd be curious
because I can't even squint, so I can't fire a gun with any.
We have our first blind pilot, folks.
I want to be able to. Teddy Roosevelt's kid, he was blind or something. He faked it on an eye test. He cheated on the eye test so he can get in the army, I think, and then become a pilot. But I
believe died in World War I.
And he died. Yeah, he did die, but he was a hero for that.
Yeah.
But that's I can't do anything. I have so many disabilities. I'm too old. I should have been born now.
Mm-hmm.
I could have.
Yeah, I'd be coddled to death if I were born now.
Yeah. Well, gang, I think we've had a good round conversation on this. So unless anybody else has any additional points that they want to get in, I will kick it to you both. Kaplan, where can people find you?
Yeah, I'm at Kaplan America on Instagram, Kaplan NYC as well, either one. You can find me. Lots of great content there about the real estate industry in New York and any other podcast announcements down the road. Maybe you'll see me there.
And Kaplan, if somebody is planning to move to New York City, you are the official real estate agent for the World's Smartest Podcast Network and the Political
I am
Orphanage.
the world's smartest real estate agent
right.
by definition.
That's
by
right.
The inference.
Yeah. According to the transitive
and
property, you are. Absolutely.
transitive property. And if you have any disabilities and you need to get past the co-op board or anything like that, I will help you just to stay on anxiety, ADHD. I do not discriminate. So,
all right. Dr. Andrea Jones-Rooy, where can people find you?
You can find me at Jones-Rooy, JonesRooy on Instagram and jonesroy.com. And my podcast is Behind the Data at behindthedatashow.com. I also write sometimes for The Preamble, which is like a kind of politics Substack.
Nice.
I have something coming out about religion and politics tomorrow.
I don't think I knew that. I will subscribe
It's
to
new.
that.
Only just started.
Substack
Okay.
is the way to go.
Yeah.
I'm thinking I should join that too. You guys are all in Substack.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just posting on someone else's Substack.
Oh,
My
okay.
Substack has like one essay that was like not good.
I was
But
thinking
the
of
other
writing
ones, I stand
I'm sure
by.
it was good. I was thinking of writing a journey of the whole school process and maybe
There you go.
launching a Substack with that. So,
Yeah, go
There you
for
go.
it.
but I'll let you know.
All right, gang, good to talk to you.
Likewise.
Yeah, it's been great. Get lost, everyone.
Good chat, Andrea. Good chat, Kaplan. If you enjoyed that conversation, you will love the last bonus episode of The Political Orphanage. Dr. Andrea Jones-Rooy and Mr. Josh Jennings joined me to unpack Helen Andrews' thesis in Compact magazine that the great awakening of the early 2020s was the result of women joining institutions en masse. Her thesis is that female evolutionary psychology lends itself to preferring ambiguous, unclear rules which can be socially navigated as opposed to clear, objective rules, and that the cancel culture and woke mobs and everything else that we experienced the last 10 years came as a result of that. Now, I think the Great Awakening was something else entirely. I disagree with her thesis, though I find it interesting, and I will expound upon what I think happened. Andrea very much disagreed with it, and I think Jennings did too. But we have a very good conversation about the topic, and props to Andrea and Jennings. It's a prickly conversation which could have gone off the rails, but for their ability to discuss such matters as adults. Good chat, and you can find it, as well as several hundred bonus episodes, by becoming a patron of the show. Go to patreon.com/Andrew Heaton or on Substack, thepoliticalorphanage.com. That's patreon.com/Andrew Heaton or thepoliticalorphanage.com. Thanks. That's the show. Thanks for listening. Thank you, Dr. Andrea Jones-Rooy and Michael Ira Kaplan, for coming on. Thank you, Eric Stipe, who edited today's episode. Until next time, I've been Andrew Heaton, and so have you.